This is Celebrity Thursdays. Every Thursday, we present you with another celebrity. Today, we're looking at 15 things you didn't know about Nelson Mandela. Welcome to Alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get informed. Hello, Aluxers. Today we're remembering one of the world's greatest leaders. He was named the world's most famous political prisoner, Father of the Nation, or Madiba, according to his clan name. Yes, that's right. Today we're talking about Nelson Mandela, one of the most popular statesmen of his time, and the man who became a symbol for justice and freedom. We'll go over all the good, bad, and the controversial to learn more about his fantastic life. Mandela was born in 1918 in a small South African village. He later started school and went on to become a lawyer. As a student, he became more politically involved and an active campaigner for the rights of Black South Africans and for the dismantling of apartheid. Apartheid was based on white supremacy and racial segregation and lasted for about 3 decades. With all that said, let's move on to the 15 things you didn't know about Nelson Mandela. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Alux. Number 1. Nelson Mandela was born into royalty. Few people know that Mandela was born into South African royalty. His father, Godla, was chief of Mewezo, a small village in the Eastern Cape. He is a descendant of Teumbu origin, whose name Mandela is derived from the clan name of Madiba. That is to say, he inherited minor royal claim through his mother and could have become a royal advisor, as was the custom for lesser royalty back then. He later gave up his royal privilege to study and become a lawyer, probably knowing all too well that his skills would be more useful to the entire community in the future. Number 2. Nelson Mandela was one of the first Black lawyers in South Africa. Nelson Mandela studied law in the 1940s at the University of Witwatersrand. He was the only Black student and had to face racism as a result from his peers. However, he also made many friends at the time and became very interested in politics and minority rights in South Africa. By 1946, he was only earning between $2 and $8 a month to live on as an article clerk, making life pretty tough for him. However, he persisted and became one of the first Black lawyers in the country, and then in the early 50s became a leader of the African National Congress, whose purpose was to end racial segregation and discrimination. Number 3. He was given the English name Nelson by a teacher. Nelson Mandela was the first person to attend school in his family, and his parents were actually illiterate. As a young student, he recalled receiving a very British education, and traditional names were not regarded well. He later became a Methodist, and after the custom at the time, his teacher gave him the name Nelson. However, he didn't know why she chose that particular name. His actual name, Rolihaha, means troublemaker, which probably suited him more than Nelson. Number 4. He was the first Black president of the South African democratic election. Nelson Mandela was not just the first Black president of South Africa, he also broke all barriers to becoming one by becoming the image of resilience around the world. His election in 1994 also meant the first ever democratic election was held in the country. His party won with a staggering 63% of the vote, with the slogan, "A better life for all." It also meant that after years of suffering, he was finally given the status he deserved. As president, Mandela made 997,000 South African rand a year, or $69,547, adjusted for inflation, which at the time was a very high amount. By comparison, Clinton made $200,000 to be U.S. president. Number 5. Mandela had a net worth of $4.14 million. Nelson Mandela's fortune remained somewhat of a mystery to the public. Since he was a revered icon of anti-apartheid, the question of his net worth was a taboo subject for most people. He was also known to mostly use his influence to raise money for his party and the charities that he was involved in. The mystery was finally solved after his death, as the executors of his will made the information public. It turns out Mandela had actually been worth $4.14 million, a very high amount for someone who has virtually no income. He also made sure to set up trust funds for his 30 children and grandchildren. His third wife, Graça Machel, inherited half of his estate. Number 6. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison for opposing apartheid. One of the reasons that Mandela's $4.14 million net worth was a surprise was due to the fact that he spent quite a bit of his life in prison, 27 years to be exact. After joining the African National Congress in 1944, he quickly ascended as leader, usually organizing non-violent mass resistance campaigns. But it wasn't until 1964 he was accused of sabotage for defying the apartheid laws and sentenced to life in prison. There, he suffered countless deprivations and, of course, was away from his wife Winnie and his 6 children. This continued until the year 1990, when he was finally released after a campaign to free him was started 10 years earlier in 1980. The South African economy had lost a staggering $10 billion because of the sanctions. Number 7. South African officials misused $22 million of the money intended for his funeral. It seems that controversy stayed with Mandela even after his death. Of course, he did have a funeral fit for one of the most important statesmen of all times. The service was one of the largest gatherings of world leaders, 91 to be exact, and no expenses were spared. The trip of Prince Charles of the UK cost around $325,000. Bill Clinton and George W. Bush were also present. A scandal later exploded when it was revealed that around $22 million associated with the funeral were misspent, or rather, government officials pocketed the money themselves. Number 8. His wife, Winnie, was involved in fraud, theft, and cheated on him. Mandela had a very complicated private life. He had 3 wives, was very passionate, and sometimes had violent relationships with them. His second wife, Winnie, was the most notorious of all. She was an activist herself and worked for the African National Congress until she was kicked out. She used her position in the social welfare department of the party to steal funds. Moreover, she was even accused of murder and endorsing necklacing, which is literally burning people alive. Winnie also cheated on Mandela with a man half her age and even admitted to giving her young lover almost $40,000. It seems that Mandela refused to talk to her because of the cheating for about 5 months, and their divorce was finalized in 1996. Number 9. The Invictus movie made $122 million. Mandela's life makes for one hell of a movie plot, and that's exactly what Clint Eastwood thought in 2009 when he directed Invictus, starring Morgan Freeman and Matt Damon. The movie is based around the events that took place during the 1995 Rugby World Cup, as Mandela was a few years into his presidential term. Needless to say, Invictus was a huge success worldwide, considering it was also a sports drama film. It made $122 million at the box office. Furthermore, Morgan Freeman and Matt Damon each earned an Academy Award nomination for their roles. Number 10. A former Mandela residence is now a luxury retreat. After retiring from politics in 1999, Mandela received a well-deserved gift, the Nelson Mandela Center for Reconciliation. Back then, it was the perfect spot to rest and entertain his fellow dignitaries, close to Johannesburg and located on the Shambhala Private Game Reserve. The place is now a luxury retreat that anyone can enjoy, especially if you're an admirer of Mandela. The place is dedicated to his life and work, featuring lavish lounges and dining areas with private chefs and a butler service. You can also take bushwalks and lounge around the swimming pool. All of this for around $5,000 per night. And Aluxers, if you're interested to learn some more about the richest man in Africa, head over to our other video about Aliko Dangote to see how rich he really is. Click in the top right corner to check it out. Number 11. There are hundreds of streets and places named after Mandela. Sure, it only makes sense that South Africa has many streets and places named after Mandela. In fact, there's a really big chance you've at one point or another been on a Nelson Mandela street, even if you've never been in South Africa in your life. There are around 98 places named after him in Europe, 85 in Africa, and 22 in North America. For example, there's the Mandela Garden in Leeds, UK, and a Mandela Park in Hoorn, Netherlands. There's also an avenue named after him in Paris, France, and a boulevard in Venezuela. You can also enjoy a cup of coffee at Café Mandela in Copenhagen, Denmark. Number 12. The most recent Nelson Mandela statue cost $1.8 million. Statues dedicated to Mandela seem to spring up everywhere, from Cape Town to London. However, probably the most expensive one is located at the United Nations headquarters in New York and was unveiled at the commemoration of Mandela's 100th birthday. However, the statue was ridiculed for not looking at all like the former president. People took to Twitter to express their indignation, saying that the statue's face resembled Robert De Niro's. South Africa native Trevor Noah criticized the statue himself, saying that Mandela with his arms stretched out looked like he was surrendering to the American police. Another statue of him in South Africa drew criticism as well for costing taxpayers nearly $600,000. Number 13. Mandela shared his Nobel Prize with his predecessor. It's common knowledge that Nelson Mandela won the Nobel Peace Prize for peaceful termination to the apartheid regime and his work for a democratic South Africa. But the world's most famous political prisoner actually shared his prize with Frederick Wilhelm de Klerk, who was the president of the country before Mandela got elected. De Klerk, dubbed the last white president of South Africa, worked closely with Mandela on his cause and was involved in restoring peace in the country and improving racial relations. They won $825,000 together, which, considering that it was the early 90s, was quite a lot of money. However, Mandela declared that his party leadership would decide how to use his part of the cash. Number 14. Mandela was good friends with the former dictator of Libya. If there's any doubt that Mandela had a huge influence, look no further than the impact he had on others, including his fellow American leaders. It's also true that Mandela's relationships with dictators, such as Fidel Castro and Muammar Gaddafi, really got on the Western world's nerves. Gaddafi, at the time of his death in 2011, was rumored to have a net worth of $200 billion. Mandela considered Gaddafi a friend and even visited him in Libya back in 1997, declaring that, quote, "Those that yesterday were friends of our enemies have the gall today to tell me not to visit my brother Gaddafi." They were often photographed together, and it was said that they had a genuine friendship going on. Number 15. Mandela was on the U.S. terror list until 2008. No matter how many books are written, songs are played, or movies are made about the life of Mandela, the truth is that his life was more incredible than any of them. However, Mandela was not a saint, a thing that apparently he had admitted frequently. Mandela admired communists, and his party had ties to Russia. That was the biggest no-no in the Cold War, and that's how he got placed on the U.S. terror list until 2008, due to mostly things that happened way back in the 60s, when he was actually in prison. He and other party members had to apply each time for permission to enter the U.S., a requirement that was lifted only during George W. Bush's presidency. Although his life was intense and full of ups and downs, Mandela was also a great leader and an inspiration. He had a tough job that only a few could do. And since we talked about tough jobs, would you guys want to be president of your own country someday? Tell us in the comments below why or why not. And as always, for those true Aluxers who stuck with us all the way to the end, here's your bonus. Number 16. A psychological phenomenon is named after him. You know you're famous when streets are named after you, but you're even more famous when a psychological phenomenon bears your name. In the 1980s, Fiona Broome, a so-called paranormal consultant, claimed that she had a vivid memory of Mandela having died in prison. This was of course false because 1. Mandela died in 2013, and 2. Her theory on alternate realities is simply not scientifically accurate. However, scientists have used the name the Mandela effect to describe the psychological phenomenon of collective false memories, which are memories that are false but shared by multiple people. Thank you for spending some time with us, Aluxer. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. If you want more, we handpicked these videos you might enjoy, or head over to Alux.com for the best in fine living content on the planet. Be a part of the largest community of luxury enthusiasts in the world and tell your story.